Single mom accidentally exposed rent receipt to CEO. His amazing response transformed their lives. Sarah's heart raced as she stood at the head of the polished conference table, whiteboards aglow with corporate goals and projections. The stakes were high and the pressure palpable. Every word from her mouth needed to convey confidence. Yet thoughts of overdue bills loomed larger than any presentation. She bit her lip, glancing at the clock on the wall, mentally calculating the hours left until she could pick Lucy up from school. Just then, her trembling fingers slipped. A small rent receipt darted from her grasp, flying across the green felt and landing with a soft thud in front of CEO Tom. The phrase overdue rent weighed heavily in the silence that followed. Tom lifted the paper, brows knitting together as he examined the cramped apartment address, revealing a stark contrast to the elegance of the boardroom. It felt as if the air had thickened, crushed by the weight of her reality. In that moment, her heart sank, embarrassment flooding her as all eyes focused on the man who was used to dealing with financial stability, not her struggle. Time froze as shame coursed through her veins, mixing with a flicker of hope that her truth would resonate beyond this vibrant facade she constantly wore. The exchange was a mirror. His privileged background simply couldn't comprehend the layers of sacrifice that underlined Sarah's life. As she retreated back to her desk, burdened by the gaze of her colleagues, Sarah's heart thudded painfully. How easily could her dream of a promotion shatter under the weight of this indiscretion? Could she navigate this dual life of being a devoted mother to Lucy and a determined employee? Internal voices screamed doubts. She pushed them aside, envisioning Lucy's bright smile, the reason she poured herself into her work. But the voice of skepticism clawed back, whispering that she was just another underappreciated cog in a vast machine. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days passed, the memory of the incident lingering like a heavy fog. Tom's reaction had been haunting. He seemed contemplative, at least. How could someone so privileged even consider stepping into her shoes? Yet his unexpected acknowledgement of her struggle began to stir something inside her. A flicker of hope melted away by doubt. He might be planning to mentor her. But what if this kindness came with strings? Were they pushing Julia into the spotlight only to throw daggers at her back? The workplace gossip took off like wildfire, whispers edging closer to the truth. Was it merit or favoritism? Questions hung in the air, subverting the fragile bonds of trust amongst coworkers. Anxiety tightened Sarah's chest, suffocating her dreams, as she wondered if the promise of guidance would instead turn into a public execution of scrutiny. Then one fateful day, as Tom stood in front of the entire company, Sarah braced herself for an onslaught of criticism or, potentially, a glint of hope. Would she feel empowered or further belittled by what he might say? She held her breath, heart racing, on the precipice of a decision. Confront her fears or let them swallow her whole. The tension in the room electrified the air, but where would it usher her next? Uncertainty clung to her like shadows, and the door to her potential stood wide open if she had the courage to walk through. The murmur of anticipation hushed the crowd as Tom began to speak, his voice steady and commanding. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest, drowning out his words momentarily. She was caught in a whirlwind of thoughts, questioning whether today would be a pivotal moment or a harbinger of professional despair. The burden of her truth rested heavily on her shoulders, as every eye in that room felt locked onto her. Tom's gaze swept across the room, before settling on her, an unexpected warmth breaking through the veneer of corporate decorum. I want to address what happened recently, he stated, his tone measured yet firm. We work in a vibrant environment where transparency should thrive. I believe in fostering opportunities for everyone, especially those who navigate challenges with resilience. In that moment, Sarah's breath caught as the weight of his words coursed through her. Was he genuinely acknowledging her? He continued, Overcoming obstacles can ignite unexpected strength, and we should honor those who live their truth. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. She could feel the collective energy shift. Perhaps this wasn't a moment of public condemnation after all. With each word, a glimmer of her own worth surfaced amidst the chaos of self-doubt. Could she lean into this encouragement? The tension in Sarah's chest began to morph. What if this was a rare opportunity to redefine her path? The echo of her struggles had found resonance in Tom's perspective, a flicker of validation that began to sew together her fraying seams. As Tom concluded with a call for mentorship within the organization to uplift those facing adversities, Sarah felt an urge rise inside, a primal need to defy the narrative she had been cast into. Why shouldn't she speak up? Was this the chance to step into her own power? Later, as the room emptied and her colleagues whispered their thoughts, Sarah faced the daunting prospect of approaching Tom. Fear curled around her heart, but she recognized that fear could either paralyze her or fuel her ambition. The hum of her expectations mingled with dread as she walked towards Tom's office. Each step felt heavy with every self-doubt she harbored. How could someone like her, an average employee with a precarious home life, possibly matter to a leader of his caliber? Yet, with Lucia's face flashing through her mind, a framework of determination began taking shape. She was more than a mere cog. She was a mother willing to battle the storms of life just to create a brighter future. Tom looked up as she quietly knocked on his open door, inviting her in with an inquisitive smile. "Sarah," he greeted, the warmth in his expression offering reassurance. "I was hoping we could talk." His words hung in the air, opening a door that loomed larger than she had imagined. The opportunity to convey her vision, her struggles, and most importantly, her potential laid bare before her. As their conversation unfolded, a realization ignited within her. This was no longer just about the past incident. This was a moment of professional awakening. She could transform her vulnerability into a strength that propelled her forward. What if they collaborated to create a mentorship program that aligned with her goals? What if she took this chance to build something not solely around her experiences but around collective growth? The stakes felt higher than they ever had, and just as clarity washed over her, another layer of fear surfaced. With ambition rippling within, she opened her mouth, determined to reshape this new reality. The words she rehearsed fell away, embracing the rawness of her truth. "I'd like to talk about how my experiences could help passengers like me find hope in their careers," she stated, her voice steady. But just as Tom nodded in agreement, a loud knock echoed from the office door, and Sarah froze, heart racing. Who could it be? And would this moment slip through her fingers just as quickly as it had begun? The door swung open abruptly, revealing a panting Kevin from the finance team. Sarah's heart sank. This was interruption of the highest order. He barely registered their presence, eyes darting between Tom and the papers in his hands. "Sorry to barge in, but I need those budget reports by the end of the day," he blurted, the urgency of his plea cutting the air. Tom sighed, a slight frown forming on his brow. "Can it wait, Kevin?" he asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "I was in the middle of a conversation here." Kevin shifted uncomfortably, his posture revealing he was torn between respect for his boss and the pressure of timelines. "It's really important. I just can't. Just give me a moment," Tom interrupted, while his eyes flickered back to Sarah, urging her silently to continue. But the warmth she had felt slipped away as Kevin's presence chilled the room. Perhaps this meeting wouldn't carry the weight she needed after all. Right," Sarah said, attempting to reclaim her train of thought. "Please go ahead, Kevin." Her voice sounded small, even to her. Kevin fidgeted for a moment before stepping aside. "I'll come back later," he said, retreating into the hallway. The door clicked shut softly, but the tension remained, gnawing at Sarah like a persistent itch. Tom cleared his throat, shifting back into the space they had occupied moments before. "Now where were we?" he prompted, his tone filled with a patience that belied the ticking clock in her head. Sarah took a deep breath, recalibrating her resolve. "I wanted to discuss potential ways to support those who feel unheard, like I once did. My experiences," her voice faltered momentarily, grappling with the reality of exposing her vulnerabilities yet again. They reflect a journey that many employees might resonate with, especially those juggling personal and professional struggles. Tom nodded, and for a fleeting moment, reconnecting with her initial enthusiasm felt possible. The glimmering hope she had ignited earlier flickered insistently, but as energy crackled between them, the gnawing fear that had lurked in her mind began clawing its way back in. What if he saw her as unqualified? Just another average employee without authority or clout? What if her ambitions were perceived as naive? Sarah, Tom interjected, catching her contemplation. It's courageous of you to want to drive this change, and I absolutely believe it can pave the way for deeper employee engagement. His affirmation resounded like a bell in her otherwise turbulent mind. Yes, I let us set up a more formal meeting where you can present your ideas, he continued, seemingly oblivious to her desire to jump into the details. I want our program to reflect the voices that are often overlooked. Your insights are valuable. Her stomach twisted in anxious disbelief. Did he really mean it? The notion that her sufferings could transform into stepping stones for others felt exhilarating yet terrifying. Until now, the embarrassment over her unfinished education and chaotic home life abstracted her from pursuing something more significant. Tom, I appreciate that, she blurted, and optimism flooded her chest. But I need to clarify, I'm not just looking to share experiences. I want to build something substantial, something that transforms this organization beyond the usual rhetoric. At this, Tom leaned forward, his demeanor shifting into genuine interest. That's the spirit we need. But you have to understand the stakes, Sarah. Pushing for change will bring challenges. Challenges are exactly why I'm here, she argued, the fire igniting within. If I can navigate my circumstances, I can surely help others find their way back. A moment of unspoken understanding passed between them. Tom's expression deepened, and Sarah realized a shift was underway not just in her career, but in how she perceived herself. The layers of doubt were peeling away, giving space for resilience to fester as the conversation unfolded further. Her internal struggle quietened, replaced by strategic ideas bubbling to the surface. However, when the office phone rang, sharply, pulling both of their thoughts back to reality, she sensed a flicker of urgency return. "Excuse me," Tom murmured, lifting the receiver. With his attention diverted, Sarah's mind raced. Could she really dive into this mentorship program? Her heart pounded with both anxiety and exhilaration as the call went on. A stirring question began to form in Sarah's mind. Would she have the courage to define her worth and claim a role larger than the one she had accepted until now? With the prospect of her proposal hanging in the air, she braced herself to voice her ambitions once more, feeling the stakes climb higher. But what if she failed? And more importantly, what if this momentum slipped away before she seized her moment? What would that mean for me? She wondered silently as Tom hung up the phone, his brow furrowing deep in thought. I really like where this is headed, but I sense there's more you want to express. And maybe there's more you need to hear, Sarah replied boldly, stepping forward. But just as she reached for the words, a vibration buzzed in her pocket, a message from Lucy. The phrase urgent screamed at her from the screen, and dread washed back over her like a wave. Could her world be upended yet again as she stood on the precipice of change? The buzzing in her pocket felt like a siren, demanding her attention. Sarah barely glanced at the message, dread pooling in her stomach like a lead weight. She could ignore it, she thought. Just let it wait. But the moment felt too pregnant with possibility, and she could sense that every choice was a potential pivot point in her life right now. Everything okay? Tom asked, his voice breaking through her haze of panic and ambition. Just a message from a friend. It can wait, Sarah murmured, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She could see the skepticism cross Tom's face, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. This was not the time to let personal matters derail her professional aspirations. Focusing on Tom, she took a breath to steady herself. As I was saying, this program can create real change. We have the chance to hear voices that are often silenced, voices like mine. She felt a fire sparking within her as her words began to flow. Imagine facilitating open forums, mentorship programs, or even peer support groups. We can address real issues facing our workforce. Your passion is great to see, Tom responded, visibly engaged. But have you thought about how to implement these ideas? The logistics, the costs? We need something concrete to present to upper management. That question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Sarah's mind raced. She had initially been fueled by the abstract power of her narrative. But now, she felt a sudden urge for something tangible, a proof of concept that could cast her vision in a favorable light. I could draft a proposal, she suggested tentatively, her voice surging with newfound determination. I can outline potential costs, the structure of the program, and measurable outcomes. If I present it strategically, it should resonate. Tom nodded, and a flicker of approval glimmered in his eyes. That's the mindset we need. But keep in mind, the higher you aim, the harder the challenges you may face. Be prepared for pushback. Sarah's heart raced at the thought of being at the forefront of such an initiative. Pushback. The word hung ominously in her mind. It reminded her of failures past, the critical voices that had drowned out her ambitions before. But then, as she recalled the inner strength that had led her to this very moment, she felt the embers of resolve pulling her forward. I'll be ready, she asserted, the edges of her fear softening into a newfound resolve. This is not just about me, it's about empowering others. Just as she began to relish her newfound clarity, the nagging reminder from her phone rose again in priority. The urgency of Lucy's message yanked her focus from Tom. I should take a moment to check this, she said, covering her hesitation with a determined smile. Of course, Tom replied, a hint of understanding in his voice, though she read concerns in his eyes as well. With nerves fluttering in her chest, Sarah unlocked her phone. The message read, Lucy, you need to call me. Urgent, something happened with the rent. Her pulse quickened. The urgency felt suffocating. Could anything keep working out for her? Just as she began to make strides? It felt like a cosmic joke, the universe throwing her a curveball just when she was finally feeling capable. Everything all right? Tom prompted again, this time with a touch of genuine concern. Yeah, just personal stuff, she replied, avoiding his gaze. The weight of her family struggles sat heavily on her shoulders. Torn between two worlds, she was faced with a choice. Follow the thrilling thrill ride of professional transformation or dive back into the personal chaos. Sarah, it's important to balance personal matters, he advised, voice steady. But don't lose sight of the momentum you've built here. We need leaders who can navigate both. Thank you, she said, appreciating the sentiment even as doubts crept in. Tom's presence offered validation, a reassurance she needed to hear. But as she steeled herself, blending the excitement of her ambitions with the uncertainty of her personal life, one thought echoed in her mind, wrestling with her desires. When would she truly claim her life, no matter the chaos swirling around her? With one glance back at the looming tasks ahead, she opened her mouth to voice her commitment once more, when suddenly Tom leaned in, eyes narrowed in suddenly serious contemplation. I need to ask you something, he stated, his tone shifting. The gravity in his voice sent a tremor through her. What if I told you that this opportunity might come with challenges we haven't discussed yet? And as he plunged into whatever it was that was on his mind, the restless agitation of her phone buzzed again, simultaneously pulling her back from a professional precipice, while hinting at battles she still needed to face in her personal life. Would she rise to claim it all, or risk losing her chance at the very moment she had decided to ascend? The anticipation in the air hung thick as Tom's words settled around them, stirring an agitation in Sarah that came from somewhere deep. What kind of challenges? Sarah questioned, her mind alight with a spectrum of possibilities. Every encounter she had faced, every no she had received in the past threatened to re-emerge in her psyche, gnawing at her determination. Let's just say this project will attract attention, both good and bad. Tom's tone was measured, but a flicker of seriousness in his eyes suggested a deeper current below the surface. She grappled with his warning, the instinct to retreat creeping in. What exactly was at stake? The very thought of risking her fragile equilibrium, personally and professionally, sent her pulse racing. She was no stranger to being dismissed, to having her ideas sidelined and her authority questioned. Yet here she was, dancing at the precipice of a new chapter, and thanks to Tom's faith, she felt a surge of ambition in her chest. "Then I need to prepare," she asserted, her voice more confident than she felt inside. "I'll anticipate the resistance and preemptively counter it. Maybe I can bring in allies, build support." "Good approach," Tom replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. "But real resistance comes from unexpected places. You'll need to be agile, adapt your message to the audience. If the leadership doesn't see the immediate value, you could face critical backlash." With her hands on the table, she traced the outline of her proposal mentally. What would it take to build a fortress around her concept, ensuring her voice and by extension, the voices of those she wanted to empower was heard? A well-crafted proposal was only part of the equation. She'd need to develop resilience and adaptability alongside her plan. Reaching into her pocket, she felt the weight of her phone pressing against her thigh again, but she pushed that thought aside. It was time to concentrate on the present. "Tom, I'll formulate the plan and focus on framing the narrative. I'll analyze metrics and ROI. I know what they want to hear." Tom leaned back, a satisfied smile transforming his expression. "Now that's the Sarah I know. But be careful not to lose yourself in the metrics. Your narrative is your strength. Don't be afraid to be honest, to let your passion shine through." His advice echoed in her mind. While Tom was right, the analysis also reassured her. If she could showcase data alongside her personal story, how could they deny her? She was compiling not just a proposal, but a battleground, a landscape to conquer while stepping firmly into her identity. The grip of anxiety around her personal life seemed at odds with this burgeoning professional determination. Pushing aside the incessant worry about rent and looming bills, she realized there was room in her life for both battles. Glancing at Tom, she saw the carefree expression of camaraderie, confidence spilling over. "I can handle it," she murmured firmly, pushing back doubts that threatened to cloud her clarity. Retreating into her personal struggles felt like a betrayal to this moment. "Just remember, you're not alone in this," Tom said, his voice softer. "If it gets too chaotic, reach out." As she turned away to absorb his words, her phone buzzed again, and with hesitant fingers, she swiped to read a new message. "Lucy, the landlord is insisting on a meeting. We can't keep ignoring this." A cold dread washed over her, juxtaposed against her resolve. With a heavy sigh, she tucked the phone back in her pocket, aware that something had to give. How could she fight two simultaneous wars while maintaining her sense of self and purpose? Taking a deep breath, she summoned every ounce of determination she had. "I need to face this," she decided internally. "The proposal and the rent issues. I'll make sure they fit together somehow." Uncertainty lingered in her mind, yet something akin to excitement burst within her. It was a confluence of struggle and purpose, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. "So what's next?" she asked, determined to keep the momentum. "Let's discuss logistics further and get your preliminary plan on paper. The meeting with the executives is next week." Tom replied as the conversation continued. Sarah glanced at her phone again, torn between the reality of her personal struggles and her professional ambitions. But perhaps she could consider both as a single quest for validation, her acceptance as a leader and as a mother battling crises. What would it take to reshape the narratives in her life? Would there be a resolution waiting? Or would she find herself caught in a limbo of her design? The room felt charged with potential, yet flickering tensions loomed. How would she navigate through this labyrinth of expectations, both her own and those of others? And as the urgency of the challenges gathered, Sarah felt herself poised on the edge of a cliff. Her choices had never carried such weight before. Would this be her moment to break through, or would the duality of her life pull her under? The week unfolded with a dizzying blend of determination and dread. As Sarah busied herself refining her proposal, her thoughts spiraled into a tangled web of possibilities and repercussions. Could she really be the catalyst for change in a company that often seemed stagnant? The juxtaposition of her professional aspirations against her unnerving personal struggles felt more vivid with each passing day and the quiet moments. When solitude enveloped her, she couldn't shake the gnawing anxiety about the looming rent meeting. The landlord was relentless, a reflection of the tightrope she walked in her life. What if failure in one sphere led to a downfall in the other? Those thoughts echoed ominously, clawing at her resolve. Even as she temporarily tucked them away to focus on what she could control, he was too long before she found herself at her desk, spreadsheets open, the glowing screen mirroring her racing heart. The figures and metrics melded into a landscape she aimed to conquer. Yet the narrative, the heart of her proposal, was the aspect she felt least certain about. Numbers were her comfort zone, but communicating her vision felt like tapping into an uncharted territory. She had to anchor those metrics with her personal connection to the project. It was the only way to elevate it beyond mere statistics. Pulling up her draft, she closed her eyes, a breath steadying her resolve. Who would take the time to truly understand data without witnessing her passion? The project was about empowerment, about addressing hidden barriers. If she could articulate this to her audience, might they not only see the potential benefits but also feel inspired to rally behind her vision? Her phone buzzed again, a message from Lucy. Meeting with the landlord tomorrow, 4 p.m. You'll be there, right? The question hung heavy in the room, a reminder of expectations she scarcely wanted to confront. Last-minute compunction propelled her to shoot back a quick response. I'll be there. With that, she realized her life was already a series of negotiations between her demands as a professional and the unending pulls of motherhood. Each interaction was a delicate balance. Every word spoken or left unspoken could tip her precariously, leaving her feeling vulnerable. It whispered to her that the narrative she sought with her project was not merely professional. It was a reflection of her life. Navigating through her thoughts, she decided to blend the two elements of her existence. What if I showcased how this project could provide not just financial growth for the company, but also foster a culture of understanding that supports working parents? Sarah thought, excitement bubbling under the surface. This was her hidden competency, the ability to transform personal experience into professional strength. Later that evening, as she typed feverishly, her heart raced with each line she crafted. It felt liberating to expose this complex layer, the struggles of working parents, while illuminating her own journey. She hoped it would resonate deeply enough to sway even the most skeptical board member. As night fell, Sarah leaned back in her chair, a quiet sense of accomplishment coursing through her. She caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the darkened screen. There was fire ignited within her, a palpable drive to bring her vision forth, despite the shadows that loomed outside her door. But doubts crept in as she prepared for bed. What if her narrative did not resonate? What if the meeting did not yield the support she envisioned? The weight of her personal and professional expectations bore down heavily now. She grasped the edge of her confidence and questioned whether this proposal could truly be her breakthrough. The following day cracked like thunder. She stood in the hallway just outside the boardroom, her heart thumping in her chest, doubts swirling like wasps in her mind. The moment arrived, and she felt confronted not just by the executives waiting within, but by her own fears. Would she allow herself to be vulnerable, to redefine narratives that felt so rigid? Or would she let her old insecurities dictate her presence? The intensity of this moment pressed against her, a culmination of everything she had trained for, fought through, and desired to change. Taking a deep breath, Sarah straightened her back, her jaw set with newfound resolve. The door swung open, and inside lay a room filled with possibilities and peril. It was here that she would either rise or falter. An intimate confrontation with her aspirations awaited. So, as she stepped across the threshold, the most significant question lingered on her mind. Could she truly merge the personal with the professional, turn the tides in her favor, and ultimately reclaim her narrative? The room buzzed with anticipation, a mix of curious gazes from the executives and her own fluttering heartbeat. Sarah positioned herself at the front, the whiteboard behind her gleaming with potential. As she opened her mouth, the familiar taste of adrenaline surged. She felt both large and small, one woman in a sea of towering expectations. "My name is Sarah," she began, her voice steady despite the tremors underneath. "Today, I want to talk about something that transcends our numbers and financial projections. She paused, glancing at the faces that held both her future and her fears. The moment felt monumental, huge like standing on the edge of a cliff. With each word that followed, she sought to blend her narrative with the company's vision. This proposal isn't just about profitability. It's about our teams, the challenges they face, particularly those of working parents juggling countless responsibilities. Her eyes scanned the audience, locking onto a few nodding heads. A flicker of encouragement ignited within her. Each statistic she presented, every graph illustrating her market analysis, was vital, but what resonated deeper was the story behind them, her own story. Imagine, she continued, her emotions wrapping around her words, if our policies actively supported parents. How that could cultivate not just loyalty, but innovation rooted in understanding the diverse challenges our employees face. Her own voice surprised her. It was no longer timid, it was bold, echoing through the room with an unexpected authority that she hadn't anticipated. She conjured visualizations of parents struggling, mirroring her own struggles, and softened her delivery just enough to reveal vulnerability without losing command. The charts and figures flashed behind her, but they felt secondary to the emotion carried in her dramatic appeal. She described sleepless nights fueled by demands of a career and the urgent needs of motherhood. This isn't just business. It's human, she insisted, each word landing heavier than the last. Yet, then came a stark silence that rattled her confidence like a tremor. One of the board members, known for his analytic approach, raised an eyebrow. While your initiative is commendable, can you outline the concrete financial benefits we can expect? The question drummed loudly in her mind. If she faltered now, could she ever regain the momentum? In that heartbeat, Sarah leaned into her preparation. Yes, the growth potential is persuasive, particularly in retention rates among working parents. Companies that invest in such initiatives have reported a significant uptick in productivity and morale, leading to both immediate and long-term financial gains. As she spoke, the energy shifted, sliding back toward her favor. The board members nodded, slowly but surely, as if they were peeling back the layers of her proposal to find the solid truth and undeniable potential beneath. In that moment, a thought crystallized like clarity slicing through a fog. This was more than a proposal. It was her battle for identity, her fight to assert her worth, bridging the worlds she inhabited. Weakness bowed to strength as she recaptured their attention with her compelling gathering of data interwoven with heartfelt storytelling. Just as she began to sense their alignments, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, a sudden reminder of the earlier dread. The landlord's name flashed across her screen, and her heart dropped. How could she focus on the urgency of her career when the pressing weight of financial insecurity loomed darkly over her future? Clenching her jaw, she shut her eyes briefly, exhaling the dread. This was her moment. She couldn't let distractions derail her. She wiped her brow, drawing on everything she had: the pressure of that meeting, the tension of rent, the love for her children. Her resolve deepened. The stakes were not just professional now, they were personal. She glanced at the board members once more, finding renewed conviction. Together, we can create not just a thriving workplace but a community that cherishes and nurtures its employees. If we foster this change, we can be leaders in our industry. The air shifted again, becoming charged with a newfound anticipation. Sarah could almost taste the shift in perception, a divergence between the cautious skepticism and the budding hope. Just as she prepared to elaborate further, her mind was tantalizingly reminded of the rental meeting pressing on her heart as she concluded, casting her emotional appeal like a net wide enough to catch their imaginations. She felt both empowered and vulnerable. Glancing at the clock, a wave of urgency swooped over her. The landlord's meeting would begin shortly, and she couldn't afford to miss her chance to negotiate stability in her personal life. The room erupted in questions, and for a moment, Sarah's thoughts spiraled. Would those inquiries lead her to victory or defeat? The intrigue of her vision, the potential for a transformative workplace lunching against the reality of her precarious situation, sent a thrill down her spine as she fielded these new queries. A singular realization took root. The professional and personal were irrevocably entwined, and her journey had barely begun. What path would she choose for the next leg of her journey? How would this meeting, both corporate and personal, redefine her trajectory? The boardroom quieted as Sarah wrapped up her presentation, the executives' eyes pinning her in place. Their expressions varied from contemplation to mild skepticism. She focused on the remaining questions flying around the table, her heart racing as they pushed deeper for answers. Each inquiry felt like a wave threatening to crash over her. As thoughts of her landlord loomed, she inhaled deeply, steeling herself against the distractions of her precarious situation. "What can we do to authentically support parents?" asked another board member, genuine curiosity replacing the earlier skepticism. Answering, Sarah felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. "We can implement flexible working hours that align better with school schedules, or create spaces for working parents to collaborate and find solutions to common challenges." She sensed their shift toward the personal, grounding her request firmly in the human element of her proposal. The dialogue unfolded, drawing her into the intellectual rhythm of the room, slowly forging a bond of understanding and respect between her and the board members. With every successful answer, an unfamiliar confidence began to envelop her, and she was no longer fending off self-doubt but rather boldly asserting her vision. Yet, as the meeting progressed, moments of exhilaration faltered under the weight of reality. Each promising exchange came tethered to the gnawing worry about the upcoming conversation with her landlord. A sharp pang of anxiety flickered through her as she steeled for the negotiations she would soon have to undertake. When the meeting concluded, she was met with nods of approval, discussions about next steps, and promises of follow-ups that would cement her proposal into the organizational strategy. Unexpected success glimmered at the horizon. However, Sarah's thoughts spiraled back into her looming obligations. She slipped out of the room, her mind teetering between professional triumph and personal crises. Walking briskly to her car, she felt an unexpected surge of hope coursing through her veins. The acknowledgement of her insights by the board had sparked something within. Was this the moment she had been waiting for, the shift where she could reclaim her narrative? She could feel the momentum building, yet the burden of home loomed larger. The car ride was a cacophony of emotions. She navigated her route to the landlord, the financial stress swirling in her throat like an unyielding knot. What would she say? What would happen if she couldn't negotiate effectively? Her jaw tightened, and she forced herself to visualize the board meeting again the way she had poured her heart into her vision, the way they listened, engaged, and began to see her not just as a woman, but as a formidable asset to the company. But the villainous figure of her landlord hovered, an impending confrontation that could dismantle the fragile sense of validation she had just forged. Repeating her proposal in her mind, she sought strength in the echoes of her arguments. She could persuade. She could negotiate. This wasn't just about numbers but about her life. Arriving at her landlord's office, the ambient noise of bustling feet enveloped her, a stark contrast to the deliberative calm of the boardroom. She stepped inside, her thoughts racing through potential dialogue. The landlord looked up, questioning, skeptical. They were poised for battle. "Sarah," he began, "about your late payment," but she interrupted him, channeling the conviction she had mustered only moments ago. "I want to discuss the lease. Hear us why we're worthwhile tenants and how prompt payment can continue if we renegotiate some terms." A pause hung between them, heavy with impending confrontation. This was not just about rent, this was her reality. As they dialogued, she realized she had the power to advocate for both her professional aspirations and personal stability. This was essential, a pivotal moment where two worlds collided, and her decision here would shape her trajectory. In that exchange, determination surged, and an unsettling question crept in. How far was she willing to fight to secure her existence? Her tone was steady but bold as she pushed forward, unearthing the resolve she never knew she possessed. The landlord's response would reveal whether her newfound courage would bridge the gap between struggle and survival, and Sarah prepared herself for whatever might come next. The seconds dragged out as his gaze locked with hers. Would he meet her earnestness with understanding or tighten the noose of pressure even further? She felt the stakes rising, equal parts fear and defiance intertwining within her. It was a defining moment, The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed her challenge, leaving her on the edge of a pivotal confrontation. What would his answer be? The silence stretched painfully between them, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, each tick a reminder of time slipping away. Sarah's breath steadied as she fought to maintain her composure, aware that this moment would echo far beyond the confines of the small office. Vulnerability danced on the edges of her resolve, nudging her to reconsider her approach. Yet, she held firm, the strength garnered from her boardroom experience infusing her stance with newfound tenacity. Her landlord's expression shifted as he ruminated over her words. She could almost see the gears turning in his mind, assessing both her desperation and her conviction. A sense of raw urgency washed over her. This negotiation wasn't merely about money. It was about laying the groundwork for not just her present, but her future. Each syllable she had shared was a negotiation not only for lower rent but for recognition of her worth. "Look," he said finally, his voice cautious, "I understand your perspective. But you must realize that I'm running a business too. These properties need to be financially viable." Although his tone was somewhat sympathetic, it was embedded with the practicality of a landlord focused on numbers rather than the emotional intricacies involved. "You're right," she replied, her voice steady despite the racing pulse echoing in her ears. "But imagine the impact of your decision beyond just the rental figures. By supporting tenants like us, you're investing in stability and community. I'm not just another tenant. I'm a single mother, working hard to create a better life. When I'm secure at home, I can focus on contributing to my workplace at my full potential." As the words tumbled out, she felt a surge of clarity. Each assertion woven with genuine emotion fortified her stance, transitioning from defense to advocacy. It was empowering, this realization that she could articulate her needs without fear. This conversation was her moment of agency. He studied her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Your work performance is commendable," he said, looking down at his desk cluttered with papers, "but every month is a strain. I can't afford not to prioritize profitability. What solution do you propose?" Her mind raced, the pressure mounting as she sensed the possibility of negotiation slipping away. "What if I can make incremental payments while we adjust the terms? An arrangement to alleviate immediate financial pressure for me could mean consistent payments for you in the long term. I also have an idea for improved communication regarding maintenance repairs that could add value to your properties, reducing vacancies." His brow furrowed, intrigued yet still skeptical. "And this would mean what for you exactly?" "Security. Peace of mind that allows me to thrive at work, lessen my stress about home, and ultimately remain a reliable tenant," she explained, leaning forward with intent. "It's not a quick fix, but a partnership built on mutual benefit." With urgency, she studied his expression. Beneath the facade of business pragmatism, she sensed a flicker of understanding. This was not merely about convincing a landlord. It was a deeper push to redefine her narrative of helplessness. She had transformed from a fearful tenant into an empowered voice advocating for herself and her daughter. "Let me think it over," he finally said, his voice softer, the edges of the confrontation beginning to soften. "We might be able to find common ground." Relief washed over her like a wave of warmth, but it was mixed with the uncertainty of what the resolution would entail. Could she truly create a path to not only stability but growth both at home and at work? As she left the office, the lingering weight of the conversation clung to her. More than a negotiation, it had been a pivotal confrontation with her own insecurities. Each step she took towards her car felt lighter, as if each managed fear became an anchor for her emerging confidence. But outside, the world buzzed, indifferent to her small victory. The looming question remained: how would this newfound boldness translate into the uncertain waters of her role as a mother and professional? With a mixture of anticipation and dread, she gazed out at the horizon. This was only the beginning of her journey, a journey where she would have to confront the internal barriers she'd built against herself. Just as she embarked on the drive home, a notification pinged from her phone, causing her heart to race once again. The board had followed up. Would they be willing to take a chance on her proposals, or was this another wound waiting to be reopened? Sarah sat at the dining table, a clutter of papers and bills strewn about, remnants of her dual battles still evident in the everyday chaos. But today felt different. The reality of the past few weeks washed over her in waves, the presentation that turned skeptics into supporters, and the negotiation that began to mend the fissures in her personal life. Not only had she faced her fears head-on, she had transformed those encounters into crucial moments of growth. With every struggle, she had built resilience. Last week's board meeting was the mark of her awakening. The text from the landlord remained fresh in her mind, a reminder that her journey was far from over. Yet as she breathed deep, she realized that this was her moment, not just to weather the storm, but to dance in the rain. Achieving what she had came as the result of embracing vulnerability and repositioning it as strength. No longer would she shrink in the shadows of self-doubt. She had conquered her fears surrounding both her career and personal life. The buzz from her phone startled her, pulling her from her reflections. As she read the message from Tom, her heart swelled. Your proposal will be presented next week to the executive committee. They see potential and want you to lead the initiative. Confirmation she was ready. This pivotal moment opened doors she had only begun to dream of. It was no longer just about a personal narrative or a single project. It was about reshaping a culture to embrace the multiplicity of human experience within the workplace. Equally as vital was her personal life. Each victory in the office forged paths to long-term stability at home. The landlord's tentative agreement to her terms hung in the air, and a follow-up meeting loomed soon. She knew that vulnerability would again need to be the catalyst for honest dialogue, not just from her, but on both sides. She envisioned presenting her life as a tapestry of ambition and challenge, a story that influenced not only her stability but could also foster empathy and understanding in others. She gathered her proposals and insights onto a fresh document, her fingers moving deftly. This would be a roadmap not just for her career, but for every employee juggling responsibilities like she had. With each idea, she underlined the importance of community and support, key factors she wanted to ensure were embedded into every program. The transformational shift she had initiated bore wider implications than her initial ambitions, and she was no longer afraid to claim the title of leader. Sarah felt as if she could step into that room, toes on the precipice of success, ready to showcase the potential of a fully integrated mentorship program, designed not only for professional growth but also personal flourishing, a space where working parents could share their struggles openly. The very thought ignited fire in her chest. Later that evening, as she tucked Lucy into bed, her daughter's sleepy sighs wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. That was it, her driving force. Each time she thought of her daughter, of the future she was stitching together through both resilience and ambition, a renewed sense of purpose swept through her. Every late night spent strategizing, every phone call to her landlord, and each executive meeting were paving the road she needed to ensure a better life, one filled with security, freedom, and scope for both personal and professional fulfillment. She turned off the light and closed the door. Sarah felt radiant. The transformations she had achieved were undeniable and finally solidified within her heart. What had once felt impossible was now a beautiful reality. Confidence settled in with finality. She was not merely surviving, she was thriving. The recognition she craved was no longer external but emanated from within. Stepping into this next chapter, she would embrace her dual identity unabashedly. She was both a mother and a leader who understood the pressures of life intimately. This union would drive genuine change in her workplace and model the resilience she wanted. For Lucy, every challenge she faced outside, every missed payment, every self-doubt had been only a stepping stone towards an authentic resolution where she would thrive. The morning sun broke vividly as Sarah prepared for the next step in her journey. She felt ready, equipped with tools forged from experience, and brimming with determination. She would not only face the future but would conquer it, an empowered, capable woman etching a new narrative of success for herself and others like her. Now is the moment to honor your journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support more inspiring narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's incredible transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share and uplift journeys of personal overcoming. You need to subscribe now. You are part of this empowering tale of triumph.